Alrighty. So, one of the things that I always have to talk about when I teach first year Soc is the idea of bureaucracy. And that's because when we talk about bureaucracy, we usually sort of complain about it, right? We talk about, oh, so much bureaucracy here, there's so much paperwork, all that sort of stuff. And without denying that that is the case, without denying that there are lots of ways where bureaucracy can cause problems in contemporary society and all of that, we need to step way back and understand what Weber was talking about when he started talking about bureaucracy, because from Weber's perspective, bureaucracy is awesome. And in particular, he's sort of writing, Weber's inspiration for writing about bureaucracy is the Prussian military. And Prussia no longer exists as a country. It was replaced by sort of Germany and Austria and a bunch of other countries in that area. Not important. What you need to understand is that at the time that Weber was writing, the Prussian army was pretty much unbeatable. They would start battles with groups of with armies that had like 10 times as many soldiers and way more guns, and the Prussian army would still win. And Weber's analysis about that is actually that bureaucracy is the secret there. Because in most other armies at the time, anyway, if you wanted to make a decision, what would happen is the leaders of the army, the sort of elites, would sit down and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and send that message down the chain of command so that the actual soldiers on the ground would know, should we go left or should we go right? And how far do we go and who do we shoot at? Like, when do we turn? All of that sort of stuff. Okay? And in the Prussian army, things were organized in a much more bureaucratic sort of fashion, in that they had a very structured, organized hierarchy and very clear ideas about who made what kind of decision. So, for example, in another army at the time, and if you were supposed to like capture that hill over there, you'd be getting orders about you go left, then you go right, you advance on this signal, and that takes a lot of time, and is often kind of ineffective, because that means that the person giving you orders about whether you go left or right to go up that hill might not know, for example, that, oh crap, there was a mudslide yesterday, and now you're sending us up the slippery, muddy side of the hill instead of the one that's dry, which puts us at a significant disadvantage, right? So there was a lot of information that leaders in military sort of positions didn't have, right? They didn't know, right? You couldn't tell, like, oh crap, there's fog over there. Oh no, like there's sort of like all of these kind of conversations that might impact a military sort of situation. And in the Prussian army, things were structured very differently. So each unit in the Prussian army had sort of a leader who reported to leaders above them, and then also sort of managed their own supplies, managed their own equipment, managed their own medical staff, so that you'd have an entire unit that was moving together. Okay? And when the leader of that unit was given instructions, the instructions would be something like, capture that hill over there. And then the leaders above them would back off, on the logic that the leader of that unit can then make decisions based on the information in front of them. So they might have planned to go left, but go, oh shoot, that part of the hill's really muddy, let's go up the other side. Or they might be like, wait a minute, it looks like there's going to be a massive distraction in the form of that thunderstorm in about 5 minutes, so we're going to put off our assault until that happens. And they can sort of make those decisions on the ground. And they can do that without needing to sort of send everything back up and then back down the chain of command, which is what all the other armies were doing. And they don't need to worry about their own logistics, right? Because you have a unit commander who might say, okay, we're going to have to go hide in that forest for 2 days because we really want to surprise the people when they come through. But they can do that because they already have their own people who are managing sort of logistics, who are sort of like cooking the food and making sure the weapons are in order and caring for the injured, because they all sort of moved together, okay? And as I said, at the time, Prussian army, pretty much unstoppable. And that's what Weber's inspiration for the idea of bureaucracy as a super useful force was. And his sort of argument there was that like it allowed people to be more efficient and accomplish their goals more quickly because it allowed for a bunch of more complex social organizations rather than what we had before, which was largely like, well, the guy in charge makes all of the decisions, even if he doesn't have enough information and even if it takes longer, and those are decisions that he doesn't really care about, okay? So when we talk about that, Weber's talking about things like a division of labor, right? His argument is that if you only have to do one thing, right, you only have to worry about, say, cooking the meals for the army, right? You can get much better at cooking the meals for the army than you could if you have to cook the meals for the army and maintain the guns and make the plans and deal with like signals intelligence and how you communicate with everyone else, right? So division of labor allows you to do more things more effectively. A hierarchy of authority, which again, we often talk about in the contemporary world as like a problem and kind of annoying because like you call customer service and they're like, oh, well, I can't make that decision. You need to talk to my manager. And then you have to wait on hold again for an hour to talk to the manager. Weber thinks this is really, really powerful, partially because when he was talking about it, it didn't really exist, right? And so for Weber, the idea of here is a clear set of decisions that you can make on your own. You can decide to do this, this, and this. If you want to make decisions outside of this context, then you need to talk to sort of your superiors and you need to talk to the person next in line who might be able to make that decision. And that kind of organization and that kind of rule set allowed people who are acting in those environments to be more effective and to make their decisions more quickly because they knew what kind of decisions they were expected to make and what kind of decisions they weren't. And when you know that, you're also in a position to get better at what kind of information you need to pay attention to, right? If you know you need to make decisions about things A, B, and C, and then you're going to know which pieces of information are going to be relevant to making those decisions. If you have to make decisions about everything, though, you can't specialize, okay? So the rules and regulations part, Weber, again, thought were really powerful because what it was doing, and what it still does anyway, is that it translated a lot of people's like internalized knowledge of what made for good and bad decisions and good and bad sort of procedures and made them formal. And that meant that people could benefit from, for example, 20 years of experience from a carpenter without having to work for 20 years to get it, right? They had a set of rules that they could follow, and that allowed us to do sort of more complex things, more complex projects, and more complex organization. He also thought that impersonality was a really great thing. For those of you who sort of feel like impersonality is not a great thing, again, remember when Weber was writing, right? Like an impartial judiciary didn't exist. So it made a lot of sense, and it happened a lot, for example, for people to get different judgments based on whether or not the judge liked you personally or knew your family. And Weber sort of argued that that actually creates a lot of drag on the system. It means that decisions take longer and lots of things are less efficient because people are wasting their time doing things like trying to cultivate a positive relationship with the judge rather than getting on with whatever their sort of role in society actually is. Because as they might if they knew, for example, that the judge's decision isn't going to depend on what they do. Okay? So that's one of the pieces about bureaucracy that we really need to understand is that in a lot of ways, the complaints we get about bureaucracy in a contemporary sort of time and place exist because bureaucracy was so successful. Because bureaucracy got things done, and because bureaucracy has become so much a part of our contemporary organization of society that we can't think of it being any other way. And that's partially because it is, again, so effective.